Hi, welcome to Herkahani. For today's episode, I'm back with another powerful story, the story of Matchgirl Strike. This one strike paved a significant change in the industrial right of the country. We are talking about London. In the East End of London, in 1988, was home to some city's largest, most destitute industrial enterprise, which thrived on their desperation. Among these industries, there were a match factory called Bryant and May, where 1,400 young women and teenage girls worked. Every day at 6:30 in the morning, they start a long 14-hour shift of extremely dangerous work with little to nothing at the end of the day. The working condition of these workers was terrible. They would require to stand for their work all day long and with only 2 scheduled breaks. Any unscheduled break taken would be deducted from their wages. The deduction was not limited to this. These workers was imposed unreasonable fines on being late, talking to each other, or having a dirty feet. Even after working for 14 hours a day, these workers couldn't afford to buy shoes. The money they made by working there was barely enough to live. And on the other hand, the company thrived financially with 20% of dividend given to its shareholder. The exploitation was not just limited to this. The factory was putting these young lives into danger. There was a deadliest silent killer in the factory, white phosphorus. Back in the day, white phosphorus was used in matchstick production, which was extremely dangerous and caused deadly disease called flossy jaw. It starts with a toothache and turns into a rotten bone, which eventually leads to a painful death. In the 1840s, red phosphorus was discovered, which could be utilized in matchstick production. This discovery made the use of white phosphorus no longer necessary. The factory owner, despite being fully aware of the phossy jaw, they didn't care and instructed the worker to remove the tooth as soon as they experience any ache. And if anyone dared to refuse, they would get fired. There were 25 match factories in the country, of which only 2 did not use the white phosphorus in their production technique. With no desire to change and compromise on their profit margin, Bryant and May continued the use of white phosphorus. The careless act of this factory finally came out one day, when a newspaper article brought this situation into public eye. The article was published by activist Annie Besant in her weekly paper, The Link, with the title White Slavery in London. This article exposed the exploitation these workers were facing. The article brought much needed attention to the problem and gave strength to the young women and girls of the factory to fight against these exploitations. This article infuriated the factory owner, and they attempted to force the worker to sign a petition stating that they were happy with their working condition. When one group of women refused to sign it, they were immediately fired. This was enough for them to take action. The firing triggered 1,400 women and girls to walk out of the factory and marched towards the parliament. The strike gained public support and sympathy, forcing the factory workers to compromise just weeks later and agree to all their demands such as wage increase, abolition of petty fines, and safe working conditions. It was a victory not seen before against the powerful industrial men. The success of this one strike inspired workers across the country to form a trade unions. Years later, trade union leader Henry described the strike as one of the most important events in the history of labor organization of any country. The one strike changed the face of industrial rights in London. Thank you for listening. For more such powerful story, tune into Herkahani every Saturday. Till then, stay safe.